name is Mary Kern, and I'm the president of the governing board of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our 2020 Zoom celebration of the September equinox. Thank you one and all for joining us today. We gathered together to honor this equinox, a sacred place on the wheel of the year, when our sun on its journey south on September 22nd marks an important seasonal shift of energy. This equinox occurs Tuesday morning in the United States at 9:31 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 6:31 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, half hour before sunrise. And in the Southern Hemisphere, this marks the celebration, the beginning of spring. For the Northern Hemisphere, this is the second of three ancient harvest festivals. This is the midpoint between two cross-quarter harvests, Lammas in early August when grains ripen, and Samhain, the final harvest at October's end. I invite you each to tap into the divine intelligence and wisdom we find in nature, into the rhythm of the year and the waning last quarter moon rising later and later in the night, moving us towards the darkness of the inner world. This is a time to cultivate, fertilize, mulch, compost, harvest, transplant, and prune. A time to take extra care of yourself, of your body, and the physical world as the temple of the soul. And the soul and the soil are intertwined. I invite in the primordial mother, her four directions, and her seasonal expressions. I invite in her ambers, oranges, and crimson of the autumn leaves falling to the ground, the flavors of pumpkin, persimmon, pomegranate, and peppers. May our northern and southern hemisphere honor this time of seeking balance, the balance of light and shadow, of day and night, as we will viscerally experience this together on September 22nd, signaling a time of restoring equality. In ancient Nordic tradition on this seasonal point, the home hearth fires were extinguished, leaving darkened homes. A great bonfire was built by the villagers to feast and dance and celebrate the abundance of the harvest. And from their common bonfire, the home fires were relit and rekindled to acknowledge the oneness of the community. The same sort of soul joining we see in communities devastated from recent fires in the Western United States. These communities now join as one to overcome their losses. And from these joined efforts, sacrifice and love, their hearths too will be rebuilt and rekindled. Our lives are a series of seasons and cycles of ever-changing energies that represent as above, so below, as within, so without. That is shamanic astrology. The equinox has long been honored all over the world from the Iron Age on until present. Celtic cultures honored this energy as one of the 9 Morgans or Great Mothers, with the solstices, equinoxes, and cross quarters making the 8 turns of the wheel, culminating in the one mother from whom we all come. These turnings were the traditions of Avalon, found in Britain, Scotland, Wales, and France. The Jewish and Islamic celebrate their New Year's at this equinox, and in close proximity to it is the Roman Catholic celebration of Michaelmas on September 29th, the oldest of their angel festivals, and a time to remember the ancestors, as do the Japanese Buddhists at this time, when the skin between the worlds thin. The Druids honored the god of the forest and offered ciders, fertilizers, and herbs to the trees. We honor the equinox, as did the ancient Romans, with their festival of Pomona, the goddess of fruit and harvest of grapes. And we honor the equinox, as did the ancient Greek honor their goddess Demeter, goddess of harvests and fertility, who is greatly saddened by the abduction into the underworld of her beautiful daughter Persephone. Mourning this loss, she allowed nothing to grow and famine to follow. The rescue of Persephone brought with it an agreement for her daughters return to the underworld 3 months each year, thus triggering a barren time on the earth. Though nature is barren for 4 months, the inner soul stills in this darkened time, allowing to emerge into consciousness the shadows and schisms that need to be healed and released for the birth of new light in the upcoming spring, bringing with it compromise, collaboration, a bigger perspective, the balance of personal truth with world truth, and the greater wholeness that all have something important to contribute, finding balance and grace at this middle point. So may these be the blessings of this new season, knowing these are extraordinary times when the shadows and schisms of many lifetimes must surface for illumination, and all the schisms we face to erase are gifts to the collective yearning to come into balance and needed for a harmonious, successful, and healthy world. May all the underworld quake the crust of our unconscious and shake alive the core of our essence. Daniel Giamario and Erik Roth will give us many insights into what this seasonal shift at this extraordinary time at the turning of this great 26,000-year cycle may bring. It is my deepest honor to now present to you the founder of Shamanic Astrology, Daniel Giamario.
Hey, Mary, thank you. That was fantastic. I just love that. I'm not going to start out by reciting the entire lineage of the Shamanic Astrology transmissions. I think most of you have heard that many times, but I do want to myself start out by honoring these two things I use to tune in at this point. You say the rod and the cone, representing the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. This actually comes from one of our sacred sites that we've worked many times in Nevada, the Fish Lake Valley site. This was a stone that was left there that I found from probably about 2,000 years ago. And this rod is made out of the same substance. It comes from the Preseli Hills in Wales, the stones that were the blue stones that went into Stonehenge. And I hold these as part of our work as a school to help correct the inversion of masculine and feminine that has happened on this planet, to bring back into balance what had been the truth about humans for 200,000 years before the great inversions that began happening about 5,500 years ago. I just have a few preliminary things that I want to share with you all to get started here. I certainly do suggest that those who want to have deeper foundation in what it is that we'll be talking about here today to go back and listen to the talks that were given in late March and April that give a really good foundation background as to the nature of the time we're in. My own view about it, and based on the research of, since the late 60s, early 70s, is that we are quite likely at a time period now, a global configuration is the most overwhelming global configuration that's happened to global humanity in 12,800 years. I've gone into some depth about that, including the Kali Yuga material, the 26,000-year cycle material, the fourth turning, a variety of different frameworks that describe the importance of the time that we're in now. You could go all the way back to what we presented in the 2017 Preparing for 2020 Summit, and then the talks that happened earlier this year. Also, some of the material that will be covered later, shared by both Erik and myself, some of that also has more foundational material that you can see in the third and the fourth of the talks that were given about 2021, but also about Aquarius and its shadow. Some of that I will reference as we go through this here today. But we're not going to have time in this presentation to go through all of that foundational material because we're going to dive right in to what the circumstances are now, and as we go through to the election, the U.S. election, and then as we go through to the eclipse season in late November, early December, and a kind of a presaging of what the December solstice time is going to be like. The other thing I want to say here at the beginning is to share with you a little bit about what my experience has been since doing sessions from March 18th onward. And every session at this point, and this would apply to all of you listening, that because of this global configuration, no pun intended, the global configuration trumps individual cycles. Now, having said that, it is still only possible to navigate such an overwhelming time period with the cycles that you yourself personally are actually in. And some of you may be in triple jackpots. Some of you may have aspects of your chart that are completely, exactly connected to the global configuration. I actually had someone the other day with no cycles. Can you imagine having no major cycles happening in the midst of a global configuration? So there's a variety of ways that we can navigate, but the main point is that there would be a way your own individual unfoldment would happen in a, quote, more normal time, and then the way you have to navigate the cycles you're actually in relative to the global configuration. So we do have to take that into account, and it's been quite an interesting experience, working with it that way since March. This also brings up something that we'll be talking about in more detail later as kind of as a wrap up of the conversation, which has to do with a reminder of the three-world approach, which is what the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School suggests is a way of navigating. So the global configuration is going to involve all three worlds, but you yourself may be primarily in a middle world time. Some of you may be in an underworld time. Some of you may be in a celestial world time, or a combination thereof. So this is just something I wanted to share at the beginning to give a context for you all personally as you listen to and take in the the essence of the information that we're going to be sharing with you here. At this point, what I'd like to do is to introduce Erik Roth, the managing director of our school currently. And he's done some really good research on three different issues that I think we need to have a discussion about to bring forth to you all before we dive into the election material, which we'll be featuring pretty strongly here as we continue today. So Erik, let me turn it over to you to share some of your research.
Yeah, Daniel, I thank you for that. I wanted just to point out, just for those that aren't aware or haven't seen this much, but this is, if we're looking into the sky of where the sun will be in just a couple of days from now at the September equinox, this is where it will be at zero, what is considered zero Libra. And this is right where the ecliptic, which is also the path of the sun. So we can see this point roughly a little bit closer to Spica than it is to the star Regulus, but we can see the constellation Priestess, and this is showing the particular time where it's now moving, moving in the direction of the lion and what we call the precess of the equinox, and it could apply to both the March equinox and of course the September equinox. So I wanted to, there's other slides that represent the equinox and what it means, but this was one of the more critical ones that I wanted to bring up. And in case we need to refer to any other September equinox points, Daniel, we have, like, for example, what this means here, and equal day, equal night. And we also have one that you'll like here too, Daniel, with the and people out there with the different the solstice points and the equinox points. So where we are in the world
Yeah, Eric, let me just interject one quick thing, if I may. I'll go back to that first slide. And this actually in the Shamanic Astrology Handbook, with the very first essay, is an inquiry into this. The fact that the autumnal equinox, the Libran equinox, is right in between the lion and the priestess constellation, and the overall symbolic meaning of that over the course of 26,000 years. So thanks for putting that up there. Okay.
Yeah, I always keep remembering back to what Dane Rajar writes in his astrological science book about the Sphinx, the priestess and the lion. So I encourage everybody to at least read that section at one time in your life. It's pretty remarkable. Okay, so what we'll talk about here is, since I already have this up, this will kind of set up the theme of Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. I'm going to be discussing a little bit about the upcoming Mars cycle, Mars in Aries, that started back in June 27th, and it's going to go on for almost 6.5 months until January 6th of 2021. So this is just a summary of what Mars in Aries means and the relationship of Mars. The sign, this is the sign that has the most resonance with Aries. Its essence is mission orientation, actional, rugged independence. It can be likened to the guardian of the cosmic order. It's also fire elemental form, fast moving, willful, strength of force. It's very martial-like in its qualities. It's action oriented, so it just wants to do. It's instinctual, so it's not a thinking sign. But as it's connected to the masculine, which in Shamanic astrology, Mars is the masculine principle, the archetype of the masculine principle. Has nothing to do with, it's not biological necessarily, but it's more the archetype itself. So Mars steps into Aries here, allowing this energy, the archetypal energy, to come into who we are, our relationship to the masculine, and going even back and what we've experienced with Mars and Aries especially over the last few millennia, in our fascination with wars, with violence, with utilizing Aries in a way that has, in a lot of cases, not been very supportive of the masculine-feminine relationship here on this planet. So this is giving us an opportunity to review this archetypal energy right now with its relationship, especially with Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, and how they are activating each other in this process. So let's take a look at some dates here, what's upcoming. The one that's really important, but there's a few that come before that, but where the cycle starts, a Mars synodic cycle. Those of you not aware, I also encourage you to watch the Mars in Aries webinar that Daniel Giamario and I did in August. It's relatively inexpensive, and it gives you the greater download of this Mars cycle, and there will be a follow-up webinar around that. But in the meantime, what we can do is we can look at this date, October 13th/14th, depending on what part of the planet you're on. This is the Mars-Sun opposition, the acronychal rise. This is how Daniel, when he did his research, created or established the start time of the Mars synodic cycle, which is very different from a lot of other astrologers out there. And it begins as Mars is at its brightest, it's at its closest to the Earth, and it's at its most vibrant. And we're already seeing it very bright out there in the night sky. If just stay up a little bit each evening, you'll see Mars rise, and it rises earlier and earlier. And especially when we get into early October, by that point, it won't be too long after sunset when Mars rises. But at this point, we can see that this is it's a really special time. Mars is going to be near its, just about at its brightest. Officially, it's October 10th, 11th, and at its closest point is October 6th. Again, these are really minor in the amount of like distance and brightness and magnitude. So the whole time of October is very bright and close. So we also have October 3rd, a second conjunction with the dwarf planet Eris. We'll bring in Eris a few times during this webinar. It's something that I've talked about, Daniel's talked about, and even Mary's talked about it at various times over the last year, and at school, monthly calls. Daniel, some of your webinars you did back last spring. There's a lot to share about that. The last time that Mars has had an Aries synodic cycle was back in 1988. It also happened just before the US got into World War II, October of 1941. In fact, that was the closest a time that we could measure to this time period, as far as the actual this 79-year, closest synodic return, if you will, from Mars. And we can see how bright Mars has been in the sign of Aries when it goes into a synodic cycle beginning. Where will that happen in the sky? Well, here is October 13th/14th, again, depending on where you are, but we can see 2104 Mars retrograde. This is in the Fish constellation. This is in a very watery area of the sky where the water bearer constellation is dropping waters of cosmic knowledge, if you will, into the watery domain. And then we see the fish, which astronomers still call Pisces, not to be confused with the sign. And then below that, we see the whale or Satis constellation. Actually, it was fun to talk about this constellation on Friday evening on a membership call with Mary Kern and some of the mythologies that surround this powerful image. And the retrograde loop of Mars is right through. It started at Alrisha, the knot where the two fish are coming out of in the cosmic waters. And it loops back almost to where Chiron is sitting, and then it swings back around up right on the ecliptic, and then it continues on its a direct motion. So one of this is something we'll talk about. This is a nice transition into the Saturn Jupiter Pluto conjunction, triple conjunction stellium that's going on in the sign of Capricorn. These are all the dates. We've talked about these on other webinars. There's Mars squares Saturn 3 times, Pluto 3 times, Jupiter 3 times, and then Eris also in conjunction 3 times. And that one, there's some definite things coming up here. Saturn square Mars, September 29th. Saturn square Pluto, October 9th, Saturn square Jupiter, October 18th, and Saturn conjunct Eris, October 3rd. So Mars, as you can see, is playing a really significant role in the expression of how Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn are involving themselves in humanity here in that relationship that they have with us and Earth. So these are things to stay tuned to. I think in my experience of what I've seen with Mars, especially on the global level, Mars has acted as kind of a switch flipper, or like a sudden volume increaser. It has some qualities that are a little bit like Jupiter, but not in a vision quest kind of way. It's just actional, it's just instinctual, and just kind of zaps things into motion. And we saw that in March of 2020 with the acceleration of the pandemic and the lockdown that took place across the world. So
I could and let me just interject for 1 second, which is that one of them was pretty dramatic, which was the Mars Jupiter square, which was the exact point of the Beirut bombing. Yes,
August 4th, here we are. That is absolutely, that was amazing to review that with you, Daniel. On it was during the Mars and Aries webinar, I think, right? We talked about that then. And so, in some important dates, what we call phase 1 of the Mars cycle, which is when Mars comes back to its it ends at its return of its original opposition point which will end on December 15th, but it does all these different things with the moon, with Jupiter, and then the stations direct and then returns back. So these are dates to pay attention to and in and around that time period. It's a very active period, September, October, November, December. This is the, you might say the climax of 2020 coming up here, with lack of a better term. And that leads into the Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter stuff. Daniel, any thoughts about Mars before I get into that area?
I mean, for those that are not familiar with the way that we're using the synodic cycle, in the 25, 26 month synodic cycle of Mars, there's always a point where Mars will stay in the same sign for 6, 7 months. And it would be during that time period that Mars actually, in my experience, is operating much more like an outer planet transit, because it's like hanging out in the same area for a long time. And so this is why the incredible importance of being placed at this point on the archetype Mars for both men and women, and how to revise that, how to revision that, how to see it in a way that's different than, say, how the last 5,500 years have seen it, you know, as simply being about, you know, about war, or we went into that in great detail in that other seminar. So we have so much to cover here. I won't get into anything more about that right now.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Daniel. So there's a couple of slides here that I'm going to use for Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto. I did a presentation along with many others about the coming 2020 year and navigating this work, looking toward it, and preparing for it. So in the presentation, I talked a lot about the different dates that are going on, that have gone on in the past, and though of course the one in 2020 being the major focus. Here are some notable times when Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter were in conjunction with each other in various signs. Now, this is the closest one this upcoming here is going to be the closest one we've experienced in many hundreds of years. In fact, here's where I say in almost 800 years, 700 and change, since the end of the Crusade period. And at that time, also the Mongol forces were moving and getting closer to Eastern Europe. This is again 1284 to 1286, and that was not as close as this one. That was, you know, a great time of change in Europe and in Asia. But this one is not as this period is going to be even closer than the one in the 13th century. This one will take place between November 8th and November 21st within 4 degrees. That means that all 3 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, will be within 4 degrees of each other. And the closest one before that was 6-degree orb, also in November in the 13th century, between 1284 and 1286. So that 1285 was that center point of that time. So it'll be another 734 years when this alignment takes place again, and it will happen again in the sign of Capricorn. So it's going to be a while. So this is like many lifetimes in the future. Some dates to, oh yeah, since we're talking about time periods, here's where the concentrations of 4,000 years of when they've gotten together. And we can see that this Capricorn/Aquarius orb has been one of the more frequent ones, along with the Pisces Aries. Those are the ones that have had the most times where they've gotten together of those 3 planets. The least amount of time is Virgo and Libra, and that's going to be, again, 700 more years at 2700 CE. And again, but that won't be as close as what we're experiencing now. I'm using a 15-degree orb in order to be able to capture all of this information here. So this is, again, there's some a video about this more in detail that I did and others did on the online summit. And I think what I'll do is I'll provide a link to that for people that are interested. And if you haven't watched it, or if you want to rewatch it, I can provide a link to that when we post this video that can give you some additional insights to others. Daniel did a presentation as well, and many others that contributed to that online summit. And upcoming this year, we can see, and into 2021, the Jupiter, Pluto, and when it's conjunct, and there's only one Jupiter-Saturn conjunction coming up here on essentially the solstice, December 21st. It happens just inside the sign of Aquarius, so we can see a changeover. This is a whole different, like, another a tangent that we could go on just describing Jupiter-Saturn cycles and the 20-year patterns and their relationship to Pluto and that, Daniel. I mean, there's a lot here, but we can see the 3 dates. November 12th, Jupiter conjunct Pluto, just about a week after, just a little after a week after the general election, which Daniel's going to be talking about very soon here. So any other thoughts about the 3-planet conjunction here?
Well, just to remind everyone that if you begin to see the pattern and how rare it is to have these 3 together and in the sign of Capricorn, why I think this is super important more than even the other ones is because of the Kali Yuga information, because of the turning of the ages information, the fact that it's placed within this time frame that in our school we've ascertained is the time frame from 1962 to 2034 as being the time frame of the great turning of the ages, which you have to go back 12,800 years, halfway back, to see anything this dramatic. And then before that, back 26,000 years ago, which we're only now beginning to be able to get some clues as to what was happening on this planet then. So it's just super, super important. And one other quick thing, just so you can, this is sometimes the way I think about it. Jupiter can only be in this area about once every 12 years. Saturn can be in this area only about once every 30 years. Pluto can be in this area only once every 248 years. So I mean, that's the permutation. That's how you work out the the rarity of them all coming together at the same time. And then you throw Mars into it, and you throw Eris into it, and then you've got really quite a remarkable brew of alchemy taking place. So maybe we can go, you're probably going to go ahead to the October 13th thing, right?
Just the date of October 13th, just to look at the date?
The chart, yeah. Is that which you're going to go to next?
I was thinking we were going to go into the election period, but
No, because this is the thing before the election. The possible importance of that date, because it connects in with a lot of the stuff we're talking about here.
Okay, I don't think I have a separate chart for that, but I can bring that up right here, actually, Daniel. That won't be too hard. Hang on,
Yeah,
just give me a moment.
the thing about October 13th is that is the point where Mercury goes retrograde, and it's the point of the most exact Mars opposite Sun. I mean, the way to be in touch with that spot, that timing, is that if you are someone who's able to work with the night sky, Mars will rise at sunset, and so then Mars will dominate the evening sky from then on. But that date I thought was particularly important, and I'm going to speak of something right now that some of you may think is out there, but some of the information I get is that, quote, the powers that shouldn't be like to use astrology, and actually we can see that through the 9/11 events and how it was magnified with the Metonic return that just happened a few weeks ago. We can also see when the pandemic emergency was declared on the 13th of March, that corresponded back to the 9/11 events. So the Metonic cycle and the nodal cycle seem to be at play here. And I know my wife and I have been looking at how it seems that governments like to use, strangely enough, astrology timings. And someone had been mentioning about how, because they are doing that, there's something big, the so-called October surprise that has been used by some commentators, and actually used by both political parties in the United States, the October surprise. So if we were to discern of time where we have to be particularly watchful for events, I think it's right around this time period, 12, 13, 14 October. And so I
Yes.
wanted to bring that to you all's attention.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. This is really astrologically, this whole time period is about as juicy as you can get in astrology, and we happen to be alive at this time, Daniel. It's
Well, one
you
of
know,
the subtitles of the presentation today was turning points, and so some of the turning points are already happening now with Jupiter having already gone direct, Saturn going direct on the 29th of September, Pluto going direct on October 4th, and then we will be, after discussing the election time, we'll be looking at the movement of Jupiter and Saturn into Aquarius. So I have a whole section here about that, which is another major turning point. So why don't we put our attention now on the election time frame in the U.S. And then we'll do a little bit of shamanic astrology speculation on the charts of the two candidates. Boy, what a choice Americans have, huh? I mean, I'm thinking of the people from the other parts of the world. Like look at look at the election now first. On the date of the U.S. election, we have still, as I said, Mars retrograde. It's also on that very day, Mercury is just stationary, just about to go direct on that date.
mm-hmm.
For a while, I thought it was going to be, Mercury retrograde and Mars retrograde both on that election day, but actually it's a stationary direct happening on November 3rd. But look at these symbols. I mean, geez, Gemini moon, and then we have this is for Washington D.C. around 7 a.m. So we can't base it on the rising sign, but certainly Scorpio sun and Gemini moon. And in the shamanic astrology paradigm, I mean, when those two archetypes are together, I mean, it's like outside the law, as it were. And that combo could be thought of as like a joker, or the Joker. Is it intentionally setting chaos? But both of them are like operating outside of like the normal boundaries. Scorpio goes to the edge of aliveness for its own sake, and Gemini, the truth. The Gemini thing is like the truth is, if you really are interested in the truth, that's simply a lack of imagination. So to put those two together, quite frankly, anything can happen. And I always think of the most, maybe the more negative view of it is like the Joker character, like in the third Batman movie, which is intentionally creating chaos, which would be the shadow side of that combination. And while people ask me, well, Daniel, who do you think is going to quote win the election? I actually use the word selection rather than election. The last two elections, the powers that shouldn't be didn't determine who was going to be the winner until like a few weeks before that election. And so, but I personally have felt, it's just a feeling, that there will be chaos. There will not be a declared winner. I can't. So I've looked at this even 8 years ago, that you cannot tell who is going to win just by looking at the charts of the two candidates. I go back to what happened during the election of Bill Clinton, where there were two different birth times given to him before the election. And then after he won the election, they said, no, this is actually the birth time. And it was an adjusted birth time, which actually had Jupiter in Libra on the ascendant, So anyway, that's a whole longer story. But just looking at the election chart, it certainly seems to be, filled with chaotic elements. Now, but for those who actually want to try to get clues from the two candidates, let's look at those.
Daniel, what about this? I just want to see if you have any value here of the bi-wheel of the Rajar birth chart here in the center, and then of course the election election day. What do you think of, I mean, was there any comments you wanted to make on this one with the moon on
Well,
the
I mean,
US's descendant?
I have looked at the different nodal alignments,
Yes.
and sort of the larger view on the U.S. using the Rajar chart, which I love. It's just taking into account that the U.S. itself, it's not just the fourth turning stuff, but it's the fact that we have coming up the Pluto return to the U.S. chart, and we have the Chiron return coming up to the U.S. chart that are coming up over the next few years. What were the things you were noticing you wanted to comment on?
Well, just the number one, the Gemini moon on top of the US's descendant, and then the the transiting north node over the Mars. And was there anything else that I noticed?
Well, there is also, Eric, the fact that while it's not precise, there is that evolving alignment of Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn that is like you can see, Saturn is almost up to the U.S. Pluto.
Yeah.
So that you kind of don't even have to wait for the Pluto return. I mean, this is like a precursor event to the U.S. Pluto return, if we can look at it that way.
Yeah, Pluto got to within 2.5 degrees of its natal position on the U.S. earlier this year, before it went retrograde back in
and then Saturn
springtime.
and Jupiter both crossing over that point also.
That's right.
Those are other things to notice here. And I certainly invite all of you who are astrologers who are listening from different paradigms, from different approaches. This seminar we're sharing here, you have all these charts, you have the research material, and you can use that in your own inquiry as you look into all of this.
Exactly. Okay, so the candidates. Who do you want first, Daniel?
You can put up Biden first, I guess.
All right.
So I'm going to share just a few things here that are some of the main features we use in the Shamanic astrology paradigm. And one of the first things that struck me was the alignment of Neptune with his midheaven IC axis. And that, Neptune is only going to hit an individual horoscope, an angle like at the most twice in a lifetime. And so to have, and I've always felt that an outer planet, one of the, really Jupiter outward, when they hit an angle, it's affecting, basically get the whole axis that's in play. So it's answering questions like, what do I do and where do I do it from? And I mean, it would be easy to say the guy I would not say that his focus he's I believe the way he behaves is rather Neptunian. We could put it that way. You kind of have to give him his lines, as it were. So I mean, I would not think that would be one of the better aspects to be in if you're want to be clear about what you're going to do next. Another thing is that at age 78, which he will be, a few weeks after the U.S. election, age 78 does not actually have a timeline cycle. So there isn't a, wait a second, maybe he does enter into his
Mars return.
He does, yeah. So both candidates will be in their Mars return, but he won't start that until November. Both of them began their Mars return October 13th. So we'll begin them October 13th.
So that's, because he turned 79 in 2021.
Right, right. And so then so Mars, whenever there is a return cycle happening for someone, then that lets us know, I mean, if there's a planetary return of any kind, that lets us know what is on the front lines of interpretation. And you can see on his chart there's a clump of Scorpio there. You know, Sun and Venus and Mars. Actually, in our paradigm, all of them are in the underworld.
Yeah.
Mercury, Mars. Mars would have been on the other side of the sun when he was born, not seen. Venus also on the other side of the sun, not seen. You know, so that's a really strong Plutonian underworld configuration that we see there. I don't think we'll take the time here to go through anything regarding the guy's history. There's not a hell of a lot progressive about his history, and I'm using the word progressive when it used to be an optimistic and idealistic term. I don't know. It does not look like a particularly strong chart to me.
Yeah, well, his Scorpio planets are all in the 12th house as well, which adds a different, like, underneath the layer of all that intensity, that there's this, you know, sitting in kind of in the celestial dream world, where he may or may not have a handle on like what his power really is.
But there is, in fact, the alignment. There is a nodal alignment.
Yes.
At the time of you know, in November. So he is actually having what am I saying here? No.
Yeah, this is of course a September transit chart.
Sorry, right. Not regarding his chart at all. So forget that thought. Okay. So
that's on Trump's chart, I think.
That's right. Yeah. So let's look at the Donald here.
Oh, the Donald. Okay, here we go.
Now there's a fair amount of important information that we can share about this from the shamanic astrology paradigm. One is that he is in one of the most significant cycles anyone can go through, which is the Saturn opposition, the third Saturn opposition. The first one is around puberty. The second is around age 44, and now he is in his third one. It's actually about to end. But it's in that 9-month window, which generally has to do with you know, kind of black and white ships. You know, like movement into a new phase of life. You become clear about what works and what doesn't work. It is an actional cycle, but you'll also see one of the only really, quote, weak aspects of the entire chart is the Saturn conjunct Venus. So he's also in Saturn opposing the Saturn-Venus conjunction.
Yep.
And as I have, when I've looked at his chart, you know, back 4 years ago, while it is kind of a uncontrollable, uninhibited, I do what I want, you know, the most unencumbered version of a Leo chart you could ever see. Mars and Leo rising. You got that Gemini deal going on in there too. You know, the kind of an ultimate, you know, a narcissistic trickster horoscope. That the one flaw on it, well, it's what the symbols would share.
No, I get it. Yeah, I hear you.
is with the feminine.
Yes.
You know, so it's actually the wounding with the feminine, you know, that you can look back into his family history, you know, probably not receiving very much love from the parents. If you know anything about his dad, Fred Trump, and so on. The women have come forth. He it's kind of like Teflon with it, you know, but there's just so much shadow, you know, whether it's his connection to the beauty pageants or to the, you know, his treatment of women and so on. Well, that's the flaw. We can say that's where the wounding in this guy is, and he happens to be in a Saturn cycle to it, which is, I think, incredibly interesting. There is also the other thing that happens at the third Saturn opposition, and that's the cycle known as the nodal return. which is a huge feature in the shamanic astrology paradigm. And you can see nodal return begins late October 2020. The nodal return, from an idealistic perspective, means realignment with original intent. And I'm quite sure if there are any astrologers out there that believe that Donald Trump is a warrior of light and is going to save the world with the alliance and so on, they probably have looked at this and said, yeah, you see, yeah, so that he's in his nodal return. His mission and purpose statement is going to evolve to another level. I'm being very liberalizing here. I'm looking at all sides. So there is actually, when I look at this, aside from the shadow wounding regarding the feminine, what a unbridled kind of horoscope this is. And there is also the alignment with the U.S. chart that I don't think we have a bi-will on that or not, do we?
The alignment of Donald Trump in the U.S. chart? No, I don't have that list.
Yeah,
up
but
here.
I mean, there is a bunch of stuff. The moon with the U.S. ascendant, and there's the whole Cancerian and Gemini themes that are very similar. There is there's the nodal alignment that we were discussing before, which happens on right around this time period. The nodal return aligning with the nodal configuration happening in November around the time of the election. So if I was betting on candidates, right, and that it had anything to do with the charts of the two candidates, his chart looks a hell of a lot stronger than Joe's.
Right. I mean, he definitely does. Although activating that Saturn-Venus opposition time also tells me that there's, that could throw him off on some level. That could be like a what do you call it? Like his kryptonite.
Well, and then also if you take it further, next year he moves into the Plutonian alignment with it too.
Yes. In fact, one might even say, Pluto got within what, 2/3 of a degree to his natal Venus.
Yeah.
So, it all depends on how one measures that, but I think that there could be on some level, even if it's just in the background, of some influence there.
But one of the things I've always felt when I look at a chart like this, and I've spent a lot of time looking at Leo ascendant charts. Actually, Boy George chart. I don't mean the singer. I'm talking about the younger Bush president. Was also an example of an unencumbered, Leo rising guy. And the thing about being an unencumbered Leo rising is you're essentially practicing this this whole deal of like, well, I am creator. I get to do anything I want, and that we could say is one of the primary shadow programs of unevolved or initial or beginner Leo. And this chart is kind of a beginner Leo. In our paradigm, the Sag moon from the past, but Mars is a statement of intent, and Leo rising is a statement of intent. And there's very little breaks on it other than that wound with the feminine. This is what I always said about the younger Bush is that he was, remember he used to say, I am the decider, and why are you practicing on the world, practicing your Leo rising on the world? This is, of course, what Donald believes is divine right of kings. One of my sources always refers to him as the shadow king. Those that need to have a father figure, they project onto we need a great leader, but he's actually a shadow king. But that's what happens when you have kind of an unbridled Leo ascendant.
Yeah.
So let's. But if we project this into the future, that if he did become president, whatever methodology is used for that, then he's going to be being in that whole Plutonian circuitry big time next year.
Yeah, I did see also this listed on this graphic. Chiron is opposite his Mercury, so I wonder the impact about that. And what is his Mercury's at 8 degrees, so that just started this year, just this summer, when early summer when Chiron got to that point. So yeah, this just interesting. That could end up creating maybe a split with him, and maybe that it's part of what he's experiencing more of when in the way he talks and the way he remembers and the way he doesn't even realize what he's doing.
What
that
he's
there
saying,
could be that there could be a greater situation. I mean, it is in the 12th house, but it's intended to be, of course, archetype is Cancer. So, there's an intent for him to speak or to communicate and think through the place of the heart and compassion and provider of safe space. Well, we know how he's utilized the provider of safe space for his family.
If we think of the connections, the Cancerian and Gemini connections with the U.S. chart, that in many respects is the part of the shadow of the U.S. If we think of the U.S. chart, it has that idealism originally of the Aquarius moon and Sag rising, but oh my goodness, Venus in Cancer, Jupiter and Sun in Cancer, Venus in the underworld on the natal chart of the U.S., also Mercury in Cancer.
Right here.
That's this kind of clannish, provincial, we're number one. Americans are being the somehow the what is the exceptionalism or whatever when you look at any of the
manifest destiny.
Yeah, all the rest of that. So the shadow, the U.S. is very much a Cancerian shadow country in a lot of ways, even though it has that roots of idealism there to begin with in the original Enlightenment project that was behind some of the founding fathers.
Right.
Anyway, I'd like to that's just some stuff to inquire into and think about regarding the election. We've looked at the election chart. We've looked at these two candidates. I personally think if the electoral project had any actual value in the unfoldment of what's going to happen in the U.S. next, there should have been a third candidate. There should have been a third party. If there had been a third party, whether if those of you that believed in Bernie Sanders or some of the other people that were into a more idealistic form of progressivism or social democracy and so on, what a blunder to not have actually led a third party at that point, if that would have even been allowed to happen.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders got kind of cornered out on the democratic process in the last, now this election also in 2016.
And also I could say the exact same two-party illusion also dominates places like the UK and Australia and Canada and so on. It's the same kind of manipulative approach to keep the same people pulling the strings. Okay, I want to move ahead to another theme.
Okay.
I want to look ahead to the Jupiter-Saturn moving into Aquarius and to have a deep dive into what this is about, as I've done some research on this. So here's some of the basic data here. Saturn in Aquarius, Uranus. Actually, I want to mention here that a hugely important theme for 2021 is the Uranus-Saturn square. And I have discussed that, we have discussed that in one of the in previous seminars. It will be a main feature of our talk at the December solstice.
Yes.
So I don't want to get too much into Uranus Saturn right now. I'm wanting to, because the Jupiter and Saturn moving into Aquarius is something that happens just before the solstice. I think we need to get into what is happening with that combo. And
yes,
I just want to share with you something here that has been my experience with clients since March. I have this whole bunch of people that have come forth to get sessions that have this big clumping in Capricorn. You know, so they basically are going through the challenges of having their Capricornian planets connected to the global configuration. But there's a number of them, and this is happening with people who are around 30 years old. It's happening in certain other groups, that following the Capricornian alignment, there's really strong places on their charts that are in early Aquarius. You know, they'll have the North Node in early Aquarius. They'll have Aquarius rising. They'll have Venus or Mars in Aquarius. There'll be something really strong coming up in Aquarius. And what I've noticed is that the way that I'm interpreting that for those folks is they really do have something to look forward to. That the Jupiter-Saturn alignment, anytime there's a Jupiter-Saturn alignment, it's like this exact balance between the downside of each. You know, so you don't, too much Saturn is too much limitation, too much Jupiter is too much expansion. But when they're together, then kind of like what you do well and what the world needs to have done come together. Or in most cases I've seen Jupiter and Saturn together, it's like resources are available. Look at the charts of those of you who are practicing astrologers, those that are born in 1940, 41, but those that are born in 1960, 61, 1980, 81. Most of the time I find those folks that they have resources. I mean, it's quite astounding in those groups. Erik, I'd like you to put up next the chart of China.
Chart of China. There we go.
So this is actually what I wanted to show you all, to have you be aware of this before we dive into Aquarius and its shadow a little bit. Look at this chart. Now, this is the chart of the People's Republic of China. Just a full disclosure, in the late 60s, I was a China watcher. I learned the Chinese language for a while. I became an expert in the history of the Chinese Communist Party and things like that. And in the late 60s, I actually swallowed the Kool-Aid and thought Mao was a good guy. I mean, I take responsibility for the fact that I fell into that trap. But since then, I've pretty much read everything I possibly can about Mao and what's happened in China. Look at what would you say if this was the chart of a client? Moon, 3 Aquarius, Ascendant, 5 Aquarius. I mean, this is remarkable. I mean, it looks really good for China. If we look at the chart of a country like the chart of a person. And actually, for those who don't know about what's happening with China, you know, as the U.S. Economy has contracted hugely, the Chinese economy has expanded. Its influence around the world keeps growing and growing and growing. It was about 2-3 years ago that Eric Schmidt transferred Google technology to China to be able to establish their social credit system, and it's a collectivist culture. It looks, I mean, if we just look at the chart of China, it's looking pretty damn good for them, if you ask me, when I see this. Certainly compare that to the US chart, and it's they don't stack up very well. So it looks kind of like hey, believe me, this is not what I would hope happens here. I'm just speaking the truth when I look at this chart. Now, they love technocracy. They love collectivism. They love social credit system. They love top-down control. They like things being run by a cadre of technocrats, and all running through, you know, it doesn't even matter these days if you say fascist or communist. I mean, basically, it's a state-controlled culture, an economy, and everything else. So just keep that in mind, remembering, and I'm amazed so few astrologers out there have actually looked at this. and particularly have looked at this in combination with the US chart. And there's also some interesting nodal alignments between the US chart and China also. So Erik, if you could put up next the slide on technocracy. Technocracies, some would say started way before, but it came about in the 1932 time period. There was actually a political party in Canada, the Party of Technocracy. Bill Gates's grandfather was involved with it. The reason why that Aldous Huxley knew how to write Brave New World was because his brother Julian Huxley was part of the Technocratic Party. And they had this whole plan of a form of government with scientists and technical experts are in control. Society where you govern, those who govern justify themselves by appealing to technical experts who use scientific forms of knowledge to support their decisions. It's extremely interesting that the originators of the Technocratic Party happen to be in the same building as where the original IBM company was. And so they basically were experimenting at that time period with the early forms of computers, and that was transferred to Nazi Germany, papers, please, that kind of thing. But they knew they could not implement technocracy because they didn't have the technology for it. Well, we certainly do have the technology for it now. And the Chinese experiment is, in my sense, is intended to be the world model. So that as Bill Gates said recently, the problem with America is there's too much freedom. So you basically get everybody on the same social credit system. But now wait, my intention is not to just share the shadow side of this. I want to go back to something that I became aware of through the works of Buckminster Fuller and also a writer named William Braden. And it had to do with, stuff was written in the early 70s. It was the twin paths of Aquarius. Now, if we think of the symbol of Aquarius, and there's a number of different ways we can look at it, but it's two waves. Now, there was a time when I would say those two waves had to do with, and this still applies, I believe, that on one of the waves is this zeal for uniqueness. I got to be me. Aquarius would say something like, be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. It would be this, and almost always, oriented toward the progressive, the avant-garde, the leading edge. And then the other wave of Aquarius would be objective awareness, the scientific method, stepping back, but from a spiritual perspective, the high witness, the fair witness, a certain kind of objective view toward everything. But recently, as I look at this Jupiter and Saturn moving into Aquarius, I apply it to like a major question, what does it really mean to be human? Because if we go back to the early 70s, even the thinkers back then, including people like Buckminster Fuller, were thinking about this and looking ahead. And they saw two pathways. One pathway was this complete embrace of technology to create technocracy. Then you have the Borg, the hive mind, the collectivism. You have a group of scientists that run everything. And the elimination of politics and the elimination of democracy. And that was one pathway. The other pathway was termed humanistic, a humanistic metristic society. Be your archetype, unlimited freedom, the ability to be who you really are. The original ideals of democracy, also associated with Aquarius. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, and yes, that dates myself there. I mean, it was heavily involved at that time period. The age of Aquarius had absolutely nothing to do with technocracy. It had to do with indigenous. It had to do with people being individuals, the freedom of the individual. It had to do with back to the land. It had to do with the earth itself as a living being, our connection to everything. So there's these two different paths of Aquarius. And I believe we're moving into a time period we're going to have to choose. Are we going, and if you have freedom, if the majority of human beings want to become part of the Borg and want to become part of the hive mind, to have their quantum chip in their brain to connect to a vast computer, which is like a fake unity, I think they should probably will have the freedom to do that. But I think a lot of us, and I certainly think of this with Aquarius and Leo, that axis, it's about sovereignty, personal sovereignty, individuality, the sanctity and the sovereignty of the self, including things like privacy and not to be collectivized into some sort of fake unity. So I just, to me, the Jupiter and Saturn moving into Aquarius is really that choice that we have to make. And so then the question comes, what do we do? What actions can we take here? This is where the three worlds approach comes in, but it's also where the deeper teachings of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School come through, which is find out what your place on the wheel is. Find out what your specific archetypal expression is. For some people, it may be to put most of their attention in the upper world or celestial world, spiritual mental realm, which would be, we're moving into 5D, we're creating a new Earth. The world as we know it is, the global reset is toward developing that humanistic, matristic society that we all have dreamed about for so long. Honoring the Great Mother, the Primordial Mother, honoring our connection with all aspects of who we really are, and remembering who we really are, a 12-strand DNA beings. That have the capacity to know divinity, to go a connection to genuine unity, not a fake hive Borg unity, collectivism, and so on. So some people will be oriented more toward doing that work. But what is the shadow of that? The shadow of that is what's called the New Age hijack. which is basically, I don't want to look at anything negative. I don't want to look at anything shadow, only go to the light. And as anybody who knows anything about a Jungian process, only going toward the light actually increases the shadow. I'm all for putting our attention on 5D and New Earth, and whether it's here or elsewhere. I love this planet. I hope it's here. But others may want to choose something differently. So there's that. Then there's the underworld, the lower world. Well, if you look at any of the imagery about Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto and Capricorn, the end points of the Kali Yuga, the fourth turning, the turning of the ages, all of that imagery. You have to tell the truth. The world itself is in its own global dark night of the soul. That is the case. And there could be any number of different scenarios that could happen in order to, this all winks out, so the lower world is not Christian hell. It's not organized crime, although I guess that word's been used there too.
Yeah.
But no, it's the kind of annihilation that happens when you have to get clear about who we really are. What is our connection to our essential self? What is our connection to spirit, to divinity, to the higher self? And sometimes it requires a thorough composting of it all to be able to get down to that level. It's also it says here feeling realm. Well, that also involves something that comes up a lot for people who are composting, who are letting go, that are in conditions of chaos and overwhelm. And that is grief, bringing forth authentic grief. One of my favorite people that I value is a person by the name of Martine Prechtel, who basically feels that the West will never change until it gets in contact with its grief. The grief, which is huge, of our disconnect from the natural world, the disconnect from our connection with community, a disconnect from our hearts and our connection to other humans, which is why it's just so startling to see what they're doing to kids right now, you know, putting them in masks, keeping them separated from each other. I saw this thing this morning that immediately putting on a face shield on newborn babies in the hospital. It's like, how can the parents allow this? It's so stunning and an anti-human, non-human agenda, if you ask me. And then there's the middle world. And some of us, including myself, with Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto on my moon and my home and roots, I look at this a lot. We can't be afraid to look at objective reality, what is actually happening in the world. So our approach in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School is this three worlds approach. Now, some of you may be in one in the other. But if we look at the global situation, looking at all three at the same time, don't split off only into the light. Don't become just completely skeptical, cynical, and negative, but also be absolutely be willing to look right in the face of what is taking place. The other thought here, how to know what your place on the wheel is. Only some people are here to be activists.
Mm-hmm.
Only some of us are here. I mean, back in the 70s, I used to say that if you found out that in 6 months the world would end, that some large asteroid is truly on its way to hit the Earth, whether it's real or whether it's Project Firesign, which is what the Space Force already knows how to do. Yeah, that really exists. It's a Space Force program to direct asteroids at the Earth, not just to deflect them, or to actually create a simulated asteroid strike, you know. So these things are DARPA has already created. But that's, if you knew that was going to happen for sure in 6 months, if you're a gardener, you garden. If you're a parent, you parent. If you're an activist, you're an activist. If you want to just go to the mountain and do the great work of working with the with enlightened beings to help the elevation of Earth's consciousness, well, then that's what you do. But be aware of all three, I believe, at the same time is really important. That's the teaching anyway of our school. So to know what your place on the wheel is, be able to come from a peaceful heart. There's nothing wrong for those of us that have a bunch of Scorpio. There's nothing wrong with having righteous outrage. You know, I mean that comes through. You know, I mean, what do you suppose was happening when Jesus threw out the money changers? You know, but he didn't hold on to it. You know, so some of us, that's our role. You know, to call out the BS, to call out the shadow. While others, it's to put their attention maybe more on, 5D and the new Earth. But all three of these are happening all the time. Now, back to our main theme, which is turning points. We're in major turning points now. The events of October and November is we're going to know a whole lot more about, how this is unfolding. Those of you down in the Southern Hemisphere have already been going through your dark winter. The Northern Hemisphere is going to have that coming up here soon. So this, in a way, each of us somehow has to be kind of, this is a weird thing. You're going to laugh when you hear me say this. It's connect into your inner Mormon. I mean, that's basically the people who are trained to have 6 months of store up, for whatever might happen. So be prepared for any any
thought it was like,
eventuality.
she was like, "Oh my God, you instinctively know to wear this," and she was like laughing about that. Yeah.
So certain crystals to help you and stuff.
Somebody
Yeah,
unmuted themselves there.
Hold on, hold on.
We're going to
Recording.
anyway, so we've already gone almost an hour and a half. We could, depending on what the feedback is and what the Q&A would be here, we could also put up and look at the eclipse season coming up. But I think my sense is at the moment, since we've put so much on the table here, this may be the time, I think, maybe to take about a 10-minute, 5 or 10-minute break. And then when we come back, it's opening up for discussion, screams of outrage, questions and answers of whatever is being coming up for you based on what we've been sharing here.
Yeah, Daniel, just briefly, I just wanted to go into, just so that folks are aware, in November, starting the first week of November, Venus moves into the sign of Libra, and it will also be contributing to the election season and the axis with Mars and Eris, and then the 3 planets in Capricorn. So something to just be aware that the feminine comes in a way where it's making a contribution through perhaps what could be, Daniel, I mean, this could be a way, maybe perhaps some collaborative energy, community energy through the feminine. I'm not sure how that's going to manifest specifically, but it could be something that could give us a sense of where there's a banding together of people that may able to counteract some of the darker stuff out there.
You have to really know who our kin are at this point,
yeah,
for sure, and to have a. I mean, I used to be, quite a believer in, the sort of Bernie Sanders democratic socialism approach until it's been hijacked, by the DNC and the Silicon Valley Israel cabal. But anyway. I'm more of an agorist at this point, local communities getting together, creating their own internet, creating their own radio stations, growing their own food, connecting with like-minded people as we go through this time. So I agree with that entirely. But, Eric, one thing that you bringing this in about Venus being in the slot also, well, Mercury, 25 Libra, during the election, so Mercury itself is in the slot,
absolutely.
So the activation of the whole configuration. So yeah, thanks for bringing that in.
Yep.
So let's take 10 minutes, and then those who want to come back and discuss and interact regarding what we presented here, please do.
Okay, I'm pausing this. All right, yeah, we're recording again. Daniel, are you able to look at the chart, the chat questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like we have one about Kamala Harris.
Oh, there's.
I know. And so like as I was just sharing before we opened it back up with Mary, I was talking with Mary that there, at least in the Democratic Party, speculation is that if turns out Biden is incapable, then it goes to her. There's also numerous esoteric scenarios where, if the election is held up until inauguration time, then it goes to Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
I've heard that theory before.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the election, it's going to take at least a few weeks, if not a month or so, before we really know who the candidate is. But
that's their plan.
But it's so, to me, it's so unpredictable. We don't really know exactly how it's going to actually turn out. I mean, so just so unprecedented about what's happening. But hey, all right. So, the last time Jupiter and Saturn came together during 2000, we had an election that was a toss-up. It was like, what's going to happen? The Supreme Court decided that.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone who wants to jump in.
I was going to say Mercury leaves its shadow zone on the 20th of November, about then. And I pulled up Kamala Harris's chart, and with 24 degrees Gemini ascendant with a north node there, it looked as good as Trump's.
Yeah, wow,
Chances.
interesting. I actually have not looked at her chart, but what is her moon and Venus?
Her Venus is at 17 Virgo, and her moon is at 27 Aries.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Oh, she gets three hits by Mars.
That certainly sounds like the law and order candidate that she's always been.
Right. Venus conjunct Pluto and Uranus and Virgo,
Yeah,
very
right.
closely.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gail.
Thanks. Let's see
Nobody
if we've got
wants
any.
to jump in and say anything here? This is your time, everybody.
Okay, I want to say about a week or so ago, Trump was steaming off at Kamala Harris, and he said that basically, I don't remember the exact words, but it was, why are you doing this? Why do you want to get in here? You're trying to become president through the back door.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I heard that quote.
Pardon?
Yeah, I'm just commenting, Emma, that I did hear that quote. Yes.
No.
Interesting. Yeah, I did not.
If you look at his face when he was saying that, he had a great fear. And
she does have Mars at 21 Leo too, so she's his rival.
Okay, let me move this out of the way so I can see.
Yes, Sheridan is just commenting, realizing that, oh, she says, no, my angles are exactly within minutes of Trump's. Oh.
So,
like exactly, like within minutes, my rising MC, you know, obviously descendant, when you were showing the chart, because you showed it before, but I looked at it more closely and I was like, oh my gosh, that is a trip. I mean, within like 30 minutes, my ascendant, less than a degree MC. So I don't know what that means, but
well, you know what the nodal return means.
Yes. Yeah. No, and obviously our nodes are, you know, completely different because he's in a totally different, you know, we're of different ages, generations, but it's just interesting that the angles, right?
This may be a very scary thought. Oh, wait a second. No, this is Kamala Harris up here. You know, in our paradigm, if a nodal axis, if one person's personal nodal axis is aligned with an ascendant descendant axis, that's considered to be a really good thing. Now, that only happens if you showed me a chart of some guy you met, let's say, right? Then that would be considered to be your soul's moving in the same direction. But the thing about those kind of alignments, they're not actionable. You know, they just they represent an alignment that is at one of the highest levels of connection. Should you connect with that person? Maybe I just take that for what it's worth. That doesn't mean everybody out there on the planet that you have that with you have that connection with. And so here we have, okay, so let me take a look here. I was just looking at the chats.
Yeah, I just thought because it was brought up a couple of times that I bring up Kamala Harris's chart.
Yeah.
Well, it's the major, look at the configuration, 27 Aries, 27 Libra. She's a full moon person. And so the configuration is squaring that.
And Mars is going to be making 3 hits over her natal moon. This is the third one is passing right now.
Right.
Second one is passing right now.
So actually, if if you were going to look at this chart and try to, quote, predict which of the vast number of different vice presidential candidates were going to be, quote, selected to be the vice president for this ticket, there's a lot of stuff there that would suggest that would have been a strong guess.
She's in an older return.
That's what I mean, yeah.
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 Node on her
and look at
ascendant.
And then there's Mars and Leo too, you know. So I mean, there would be an example definitely of someone who would not be afraid of Donald Trump.
Well,
She'd be the
and
best one
having
to
an Aries
debate
moon
him.
to boot too. Yeah,
Indeed,
absolutely.
right,
She'd be the best one to debate Trump. Sure. Don't
Yeah.
leave
Yeah.
Biden off the stage. Let Kamala debate him.
I would like to see that.
She can whisper in his ear.
I would put on a pretty good show.
Really.
Mm.
Okay, somebody just asked, what does it mean to be, you know, being? I mentioned that she was born under the full moon. Well, I mean, just in general, the full moon is a time of maximum energetic, expansive energies. You know, I would say that anybody born under the full moon has a strong signature, but here it's of course emphasizing the resonant polarity between the Libra Mystery School and the Aries Mystery School. It's just it's a very strong signature, and then you have the Mars transit that's activating the Aries moon. You know, so that's definitely a strong signature without question.
I think they made what they were asking is how can you see it on the chart? The fact that her moon is opposing her sun. I think it makes it helpful.
Sorry, Mary, what do you?
Oh, well, in terms of what is being a full moon person, they may have been curious about how you knew she was a full moon person, and that would be because her moon is opposing her sun on her natal chart. That's
right.
Yeah.
Just minutes from exactness, actually.
Yeah.
And then there's Eris also that's there, the Eris Mars conjunction with the moon in Aries.
Well.
I could easily see that it's like it's her way to gain power, actually. You know, for sure.
Right.
No,
I know enough about her history in California that I think she could easily just be the attack dog of the DNC, the attack dog of the democratic aspect of the technocratic state.
That would be only if she sees that as just. I mean, is there an indication that she would see that as being justice?
Well, I mean, Venus and Virgo conjunct Pluto and Uranus. Geez, I mean, the shadow of Virgo is loving everything in a carefully controlled pattern. I mean, to the control program. I mean, just if you've looked at her history as Attorney General and everything else, it seems to be way more about control than justice.
Okay.
I mean, my intention is not to be, quote, right about this. I mean, that's just how doing some of the research into her past and so on. That's all. And she's perfect for the control programs of the DNC and the aspect of the powers that shouldn't be that are like FEMA. You know, I mean, FEMA is actually running the show in the United States. Oh, I know. I love the warrior Amazon aspect. It's just that the problem is that whether it's men or women, it's like, who do you serve? I mean, the phenomenal warrior women archetypes they still serve something, you know. And they could easily serve the patriarchies as much as anything else. So I'm sorry if you took what I said there personally. I love warrior feminine, particularly if they're guardians of the cosmic order. You know, if they're guardians of the sovereignty and autonomy of human beings. So sorry about that.
Well, Daniel, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, I know that she's got that history of control, but it doesn't necessarily say that, or that she will, you know, go full tilt into any kind of, you know, be a subscriber, a full subscriber, and do everything that a particular elite group wants her to do. She has a strong spirit. I feel like she will find her path. I actually like her, and hope that if she does get elected, I hope that she finds a path through a way to really guide us in a different direction. But again, I don't know for sure. This is just speculation here.
Well, I'm way open for that being true. It's just that so far, when I see that kind of energy, it looks to me like a woman who is serving her inner patriarch. And just because someone is female doesn't mean they're on the side of matristic, you know, humanism. There's just as many women who serve the patriarchy, and there's plenty of men these days that serve the primordial mother. So we have to get beyond whether you're biologically male or female. That's my opinion.
Right. I thank you, but I don't know. I just have this feeling that Kamala is somebody that can really show up, but that at least has the potential to show up in a way that could benefit us. But
Right.
again, we are in unprecedented times, and it is such a bizarre year. I mean, 2020 could become the year that becomes its own, like 9/11 becomes its own like force, like when we describe things.
I mean, I'll just give another example for those that happen to be in the Southern Hemisphere of another example of an Amazonian woman who I believe serves the patriarchy, and that's that Prime Minister of New Zealand. So it's just been a foundational principle in our school to be able to see beyond whether you're biologically male or female, because of the fact that there are plenty of men who serve the primordial mother, and there are plenty of women who are actually unwittingly serving patriarchy. That's my sole point. And
right.
if my view about Kamala Harris is wrong, believe me, just the same way I tell my trumpeter friends that if it turns out that the QAnon people are right, that he's the savior, I will eat lots of crow. I just don't see it.
God.
I do have a
Maybe Biden will
Oh.
win, and then he'll die.
I have a lot of friends who buy into the alliance and Donald Trump as being the savior.
Yeah, I feel, I'm sorry that you're having that experience there, Daniel. That is very disturbing.
I know. Well, no, you'd be amazed how many people in the New Age community think he's wonderful, including a lot of women. I'm serious. I've gone down that rabbit hole to try to figure out why they feel that way. And in fact, for those that, if you've ever run into anybody like that, I actually created a document of 17 questions to ask the QAnonites, you know, so to see if they can answer those questions, things that they're cognitively dissonant about.
Well, Daniel, back in
yeah, I agree.
What you just said. Well, no,
absolutely.
Daniel, what you just said about the New Zealand PM, it reminds me of a Colbert short that he did when he was visiting New Zealand, and the New Zealand Prime Minister actually picked him up at the airport, and then he ended up he did an interview with the PM, and it was a fun deal. I don't know much about her at all, except through, you know, just like little bits and pieces, but she seemed very personable and down to earth, and, you know, like she didn't seem what you were describing, but you may have done more research there. I don't know.
Well, no, I know what's happening in New Zealand. And you know, that's a beta test for New World Order, actually. I mean, it's easier. That's where people like Elon Musk and Bill Gates have their bunkers.
In New Zealand?
Yes.
If you take
I
a
would be
look
more than happy to send my questions to Trumpeteers and QAnonites to anyone who wants it.
Well, it looks like we're
I
getting
know.
some requests for those
Yeah,
questionnaires,
I
Daniel.
know. I know.
So looks
So
like you're going
what
to have to do something here.
I would actually suggest that anyone who wants that just to email directly, because I'm not capturing all of this on the chat.
Well,
Erik,
wow.
Erik,
Yes, Emma.
if you look at her Kamala's chart,
Who? Kamala's chart?
Kamala's chart.
Yes.
Saturn opposite Mars, Jupiter opposite Neptune. She's got a major cross there, and
yes,
I have Saturn in Aquarius, and I know personally the role that Saturn plays on my Aquarian energy, and I am real pleased with that. I would love to see her in charge of this country.
Well, I would too. I mean, to be perfectly honest, she was one of my if I were to, like, I'm not Democratic Republic. I'm not any of the major parties. I consider myself independent, but I really liked her spirit. She's really, I thought she would be the one to take down Trump. And, you know, along with my other favorites, Bernie Sanders, of course. So yeah, I would agree with you. And I just hope that she, when she gets in there, if she does get in there, that she sticks to her guns, and she, you know, really is fully in her spirit, you know, as she goes through that.
Well, Eric, I hear you, and I hope you're right. But what you're saying there is still buying into the two-party paradigm, as if somehow if the Democrats win, that's better. When in fact, my whole approach, the people that I'm really interested in these days, are basically those who are able to see beyond that. You know, that I don't think either political party. And by the way, we're getting a lot of requests here about looking at the upcoming eclipses. 3 or 4 people have asked for that.
You want me to bring that? I can bring that up.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, so I've got even the visuals around, where am I? There we go. Which one? Do you want to look at the solar eclipse?
Yeah, that's the more important of the two.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah, it's on Trump's moon, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah,
I thought
Trump's moon.
Yeah.
Really close, yeah.
See, I thought
really close.
Daniel, I had thought that I changed it to Washington, D.C. I had trouble with the settings on SolarFire, and it still kept Ashland, so I apologize for that.
Well, we'll just forget about the angles. But by the way, this solar eclipse will go across South America, and it's about 2.5 minutes long. So it is a total solar eclipse. Yeah, there's the track. Thank you. Yeah.
I read that there was a solar eclipse that was in this very similar pattern in 2017, except it actually went more into Africa, in Southern Africa in 2017 as well. But very, very close to the same area where it passed in, that this one coming up in December is.
By the way, this is just a completely different subject, but it has to do with eclipses. One of my clients told me, it was Tammy, who said that she was really optimistic about the 2017 solar eclipse in the U.S. because a very same eclipse on the same day in 1154 was when the Iroquois Confederacy began.
Wow.
Yeah, and of course we very much champion the Iroquois Confederacy, the Circle of Grandmothers, the the Council of Elders serving the primordial mother that make the decisions for hiring and firing the chiefs. And so there was a similarity, according to Tammy's research. She apparently did a whole webinar on it, about the Iroquois Confederacy beginning with a solar eclipse in 1154 that was the same, almost exactly the same as the 2017 one that hit the U.S. So I mean, it was very interesting. I just wanted to throw that out there. I've been meaning to follow up on that.
I didn't know that. That's a great. I'm glad she did that research.
Yeah. So shout out to her on that. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
That's just maybe something somebody else can follow up on more. I'm going to look into it too.
So yeah, we have the solar eclipse at 23 degrees Sagittarius, and let's see, just only 4 degrees, well, really only 3 degrees from the south node. So it's a south node version. And then Mercury's right there, 3 degrees away. So obviously the ascendant, we can't look at that, but we can see that the alignment between Pluto and Saturn are still, what is that? Only 6 degrees. So they're still really, really close to each other here. Just before they move in, just days before they move into Aquarius.
Right, and that's also still close to the the galactic alignment, and it's very close to that, and but also amazingly the connection with Donald Trump's chart, South Node 20 Sag, Moon 20 Sag. That's Donald Trump's chart.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well then, let's bring up his chart. Just see if we can. Yep. Okay. There it is. Yeah. Just a few degrees away. Okay. Look at that.
So that should be very intriguing to see what happens with that. So also, just so you all know that there is the whole concept of the eclipse season, which is, unless there's 3 eclipses, which sometimes happens, is about a 2-week time period, and there's 2 of them every year. So this particular eclipse season begins with the penumbral, or not a strong lunar eclipse that happens. We can look at that for a moment and then come back to the solar.
This coming up. I have it here.
Yeah, yeah. So here's
November 30.
This is like a super new moon here.
Yep. It's a Sag Gemini eclipse, 8.5 degrees.
So again, here we have, of course, you see the nodal axis, and so Gemini Sag. There's a lot of people that work with the whole patterning of eclipses. Going back to the 18-year, 19-year ones. One of the things we did not feature here, which we had discussed when we were planning this out, was to show the metonic return, the remarkable factor that 9/11 happened under a certain configuration, and there's the nodal cycle of the metonic 19-year cycle and the nodal return cycle. It's all between 18 and 19 years. And the remarkable similarity between the 9/11 events and what has transpired in this year, from the declaration of the pandemic to Trump signing, turning over the authority of the U.S. to FEMA on the 13th of March, and then also the fires, the fire events on the West Coast, which have there's a lot of speculation about what's going on with that. As being, I felt that was actually the next level of 9/11 as far as what was happening there.
Yeah, I was on the front lines of that. Just a mile and a half to 2 miles away, the fire came within my place in Southern Oregon. So yeah, I mean, the amount of structures that were destroyed just in these little towns here, roughly 3,000 buildings wiped out in a 24-hour period. Fortunately, very few people died, but still, it was just a great loss of people's lives in a sense of their livelihoods. And so yeah, I did a little post on Facebook about the nodal return of 9/11 and how that, I mean, literally September 8th was that date of the fire that went through my area, and but the fires have been, especially since August in California and then in Oregon in September, have just been the unprecedented in the amount of
yeah, and
acreage.
the amount of smoke and other kinds of pollution in the air. Some are saying now that less people are believing in the COVID thing, that they need something else in order to make sure masks will keep being used, you know, for like forever. And so therefore the air pollution now blowing across the whole country. There's a great deal of evidence regarding and Pei from Australia was commenting that those that are in the know down there, a lot of the fires were manipulated down there. There's a lot of evidence out there, not in the mainstream media, regarding how those fires were set, the strange anomaly of the fires, of trees not burned at all, but cars melted down. I mean, the stuff being melted down, that wood fires. I saw something the other day that wood homes completely undamaged, but homes that
Yes.
that have the smart meters and have metal in them and are connected to other things are melted down. Cars melted down, and then, you know, there's bushes nearby that are not even touched. Anyway, and then meanwhile, the two sides are blaming each other. You know, one side says, well, that was Antifa that did it. And then, of course, the other side says, oh, no, it's the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. You know, it's the right-wing nationalists that have gone in and lit the fires. It's just all designed to create more polarity.
But they've done, I mean, the local law enforcement did investigations. This is local law enforcement here. They didn't find any evidence of Antifa or Proud Boys, or, you know, several of them were on meth or had other circumstances, but they would look at, you know, their social media. They would look at things to see if they connected them to any kind of organization like that, and they didn't find any connections. At least out here in Oregon, they didn't.
It's
For some,
remarkable.
I did that the power lines, the power lines, wherever they were, they contributed to those fires too, didn't they?
Yes, they did, absolutely, and a couple of the major fires, big time.
Well, I saw some of the photographs of of what happened in Paradise in 2017, compared to some of the fire zones in the towns. They all have this sort of sulfur over the top of melted metal and everything else that is not generally. I think 2017 was a trial run on their capacity to do what they're doing with the fire.
2018, November 2018.
Yeah, right.
Campfire.
Yes, right. Thanks. Yeah.
I have a client right now who was in that, lost everything. She and her husband are moved to Green Valley. He talked about the trees igniting from within and exploding.
Yes. I have some film footage of that happening in Oregon, actually. Now, for the
we're kind of at the top of the hour here, Daniel. At the 2-hour marker.
Yes.
So we covered a heck of a lot, and this is primarily for you all to do deeper inquiry, and to have all the sort of data to interpret. You know, I'd like to actually end by sharing something. To end it on a more uplifting note here. Besides my motto these days is question everything and come to your own conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But here's what I want to read. This comes from one of my favorite sort of connect the dots, up level, more from a spiritual perspective. It's from, this is a quote from Lisa Renee of an energetic synthesis. Every one of us has a valuable part to play in the planetary ascension by supporting the divine plan for evolving humanity toward the disclosure event timeline. And you can look at disclosure event on any number of different levels. It's really to reveal who we really are and what's the truth of what's happened on this planet. It may be that your role is to be loving and kind and to spread spiritual love into the earth, or to fully embody your highest spiritual source, or to clear shadow forms from gaining control over your mind. Spiritual ascension is not glamorous. It requires dedication in the self-inquiry process and in clearing the miasma with shadow work, being totally honest with ourselves and others, and attempting to open your crystal heart petals as wide as possible to allow the pure love of God to guide us through the maze of confusion and darkness. Stay the course. Don't listen to the demonic voices and echo chambers repeating the controlled narrative of the tyrants and bullies. The world is not ending. The benevolent forces of God's source and Christos Sophia are reclaiming this earth, and ascension is assured for all. It is only a matter of time.
Amen.
So with that, thanks for the
Beautiful.
participation of everyone. And if you want any of that stuff, my questions to the QAnonites, please just email me, danielgiamario@gmail.com, and I'll send it out to you. Love you all. Till
Bye.
next time, we'll have another one of these at the solstice.
Thanks for
Thank you everyone for being here. We're excited to go through, and you'll see the recording of this by the next day.
Love you guys.
Blessings.
good equinox.
Blessings.